At my son's wedding rehearsal dinner, I watched him laugh with his future in-laws, their family filling 3 entire tables. My side had 4 people. When the photographer asked for family photos, his bride's mother stepped forward and said, "Just the real family, please." My son nodded. I wasn't called up. That night, I didn't cause a scene. I did this. The next morning, they opened my gift and everyone went silent. The invitation arrived in May, heavy cardstock, gold lettering embossed so thick I could feel each letter under my fingertips. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Jennifer Lynn Patterson, to Michael James Cooper. Michael. My son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone for more than half his life. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters repeatedly, feeling the expense in every detail, the weight of the paper, the quality of the printing. The wedding was in 3 months, August 15th, at some exclusive vineyard 2 hours north. Black tie optional, reception to follow with dinner and dancing. At the bottom, in smaller print that somehow felt louder than everything else, limited seating available. RSVP by June 1st, limited seating. At my son's wedding. Like it was the exclusive concert, not a celebration of family. I called him that evening, after I'd stared at the invitation for 2 hours. After I'd made myself tea, I didn't drink and paced my kitchen until my feet hurt. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted, voices and laughter in the background. "Mom, hey, did you get the invitation?" "I did, it's beautiful." "Really elegant." Jen's mom went all out. She's been planning this for like a year already. She has binders. Actual binders full of fabric swatches and flower arrangements. A year. They'd been engaged for 14 months. And apparently Jennifer's mother had been orchestrating every single detail while I learned about major decisions through Facebook posts and brief phone calls where Michael sounded rushed and distracted. "I'd love to help," I offered carefully, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "With whatever you need. I could help with invitations or decorations or..." "Oh, it's pretty much handled. Mrs. Patterson has a whole team. Wedding planner, caterer, florist, photographer, the whole thing. It's honestly kind of overwhelming. But thanks, Mom. I appreciate it. Mrs. Patterson, not Barbara. Not even Jen's mom. Mrs. Patterson, formal and distant. Like she was royalty and I was just some distant acquaintance. Well, I'm really looking forward to it, I said, keeping my voice deliberately bright and supportive. Yeah, it's going to be great. Jen's really excited. Listen, I gotta go. Jen and I are meeting the florist in 20 minutes and we're already running late. Love you. He hung up before I could say I love you back. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, the invitation still in my hand, and tried desperately not to feel what I was feeling. Tried not to think about how Michael used to call me every single Sunday without fail. How we'd talk for an hour about everything and nothing. How that had become every other Sunday. Then once a month, then only when I called first and left. Voicemails he'd return days. Later with apologies about being busy. Tried not to think about how he'd moved 6 hours away immediately after college. Graduation and never looked back. Never once suggested I move closer. Never invited me to visit more than twice a year. But I was thinking about it. All of it. Every small rejection, every missed call, every time I'd felt like I was losing him. It started when Michael was 16. That's when his father David left us. Walked out on a Tuesday morning in October, kissed me on the cheek, said he'd be back after work like it was any other day, and never came home. I found the note 3 days later, tucked under a coffee mug in the back of the cabinet, written on a torn piece of notebook paper. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. No explanation beyond that. No forwarding address. No phone number. Just gone. Like our entire life together meant nothing. Michael took it hard. Harder than I'd expected. He stopped talking, stopped eating, locked himself in his room for weeks. I tried everything I could think of. Therapy sessions he sat through in silence. Support groups where he wouldn't participate. Family counseling sessions that I attended alone because David couldn't be bothered to show up even for his own son, even when the therapist specifically requested his presence. I worked double shifts at the hospital where I'd been a nurse for 12 years, covering the bills David left behind like landmines, the mortgage he'd stopped paying, the car payment that was suddenly my responsibility, Michael's school expenses, his basketball fees, his class trips, everything that kept piling up. I sold my engagement ring, the one David had proposed with, to keep us afloat that first year. Got maybe a third of what it was worth at some pawn shop downtown, but it was enough to cover 2 months of mortgage payments. I wore scrubs so worn they were nearly transparent, the fabric thin and faded, because I couldn't afford new ones and Michael needed new shoes for basketball, new clothes for school, a graphing calculator for his math class. I was there. Every single game, even the away games that required 2-hour drives. Every parent-teacher conference, even when I had to swap shifts to make it. Every late night when he couldn't sleep, when nightmares about his father leaving woke him up crying. I held us together with duct tape. Determination and sheer stubborn will. And then David came back. Michael was 19, home from his first year of college for Christmas break. It was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. I was in the kitchen making cookies, Michael's favorite recipe, when the doorbell rang. And there was David, standing on our doorstep like he'd just been gone for the weekend instead of 3 years. He looked good. Too good. New car in the driveway, some sleek silver thing that probably cost more than I made in a year. New watch on his wrist, expensive suit, hair professionally styled. He looked like success, like he'd left us behind and found something better. He'd found himself, he said with that familiar smile. He'd been working through some things, he explained vaguely. He wanted to rebuild their relationship, he promised, looking past me to where Michael stood frozen in the hallway. I should have slammed the door in his face. Should have told him you don't get to abandon your kid for 3 years and waltz back in when it's convenient, when the hard work is done and you want to play dad again. But Michael was standing behind me, and the look on his face, desperate, raw, aching hope, I couldn't take that away from him. So I let David in. Stepped aside and watched him walk into the home he'd abandoned. Watched him hug the son he'd left behind. And I watched him charm his way back into Michael's life over hot chocolate and apologies that sounded rehearsed. It happened fast. Within 2 months, David was taking Michael to expensive dinners at steakhouses I couldn't afford. Within 6 months, they were going on weekend trips, father-son bonding experiences to make up for lost time. Within a year, Michael had moved to the city where David lived, taking a job at David's firm, living in an apartment David helped him find. Within 2 years, it was like those 3 years of abandonment had never happened. Like I'd never sat up with Michael through panic attacks. Like I'd never worked myself to exhaustion to keep a roof over his head. Like I'd never been there at all. I became the backup parent, the one who got called when David was busy with work, the one who sent birthday cards that were acknowledged with brief texts. Thanks, Mom. 2 words, no punctuation. Sent 3 days after his birthday. And now Michael was getting married. And I was learning about it through a formal invitation, while David's girlfriend, some woman named Cassandra who was barely 5 years older than Michael, had been invited to the engagement party. I'd found out about the engagement party 3 months after it happened, through Instagram photos I stumbled across at 2 a.m. I wasn't invited. Nobody had mentioned it. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday night, the evening before the wedding. I drove the 2 hours alone, my best dress hanging carefully in the back seat, my stomach churning with anxiety that made me feel sick. I'd barely eaten that day, too nervous to keep anything down. The venue was stunning, I had to admit. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens that looked like something from a magazine, string lights draped elegantly between ancient oak trees, a fountain in the courtyard that sparkled under the setting sun. Inside, round tables were set with cream-colored linens and gold-rimmed china, crystal glasses that caught the light, centerpieces of white roses and greenery. There had to be 60 people there, maybe 70. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter. I found my assigned seat, checking the place cards twice because I couldn't believe it the first time. Table 9, tucked in the back corner, near the kitchen doors where servers rushed in and out with trays. I was seated with Jennifer's distant cousins. Second or third cousins, maybe. People I'd never met. People who looked at me with polite confusion when I introduced myself. Michael's table, Table 1, was front and center under a spotlight. David sat beside him, laughing easily, Cassandra on his other side in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Both of them looked perfectly comfortable, perfectly at home, like they belonged there. Jennifer's family occupied tables 2, 3, and 4, spreading out like they owned the place. Which in a way they did. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, all of them dressed immaculately in designer clothes, all of them fitting seamlessly into this world of wealth and elegance. They talked and laughed, exchanging family stories and inside jokes, a unit that had always been together. My side of the family. Me, my sister Ruth, who'd driven down from Michigan despite her arthritis acting up. My elderly Uncle Frank, my mother's brother, who'd come despite barely knowing Michael. And my childhood friend Diane, who'd come purely as emotional support because she knew I couldn't do this alone. 4 people to represent my entire side of the family, tucked away in the back where we wouldn't interfere with the real celebration. Jennifer's mother, Barbara Patterson, stood at the front of the room in a designer gown that shimmered under the lights, probably cost more than my car and my mortgage payment combined. She looked like money, old money, generational wealth. She tapped her champagne glass with a silver fork, and the room fell into immediate, respectful silence. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice warm but commanding, practiced from years of hosting events like this. "Welcome to the celebration of Jennifer and Michael's love story. Tomorrow, our families will officially unite, and we couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Michael into our family. Our families. Like Michael's family was anyone but me. Like those years of raising him alone didn't count. Didn't create a family worth mentioning," she went on, talking about Jennifer's childhood, her accomplishments, recounting adorable stories and milestones. How Jennifer had been valedictorian of her high school. How she'd graduated magna cum laude from Yale. How they were so proud of the woman she'd become. Then Barbara gestured gracefully to David, her smile widening. "And of course, we're so grateful to Michael's father, David, for raising such a wonderful young man. We're delighted to have him here celebrating with us." My hands clenched in my lap so tightly my nails dug into my palms, leaving little crescent-shaped marks. Ruth reached over silently and squeezed my arm, a gesture of solidarity and sympathy. David stood, straightening his expensive jacket, and gave a speech about fatherhood. About watching Michael grow up. About being proud of the man he'd become. About the values he'd instilled, the lessons he'd taught, the bond they shared. People applauded warmly. Michael beamed, looking at his father with open admiration and love. Jennifer squeezed Michael's hand. Barbara dabbed at her eyes delicately. I sat in the back and wanted to scream. Wanted to stand up and shout the truth. That David hadn't watched Michael grow up. That he'd missed 3 crucial years. That I was the one who'd been there, who'd sacrificed, who'd raised him. But I stayed silent. Clapped politely when everyone else clapped. Smiled when people glanced my way. I waited for someone to acknowledge me. To say thank you to the woman who'd actually raised Michael, who'd been there when David wasn't, who'd given up everything to make sure her son had what he needed. No one did. Not one single person mentioned my name. After dinner, after the speeches and toasts and laughter, the photographer gathered everyone for pictures. "Family photos!" he called out cheerfully, waving people toward the grand staircase in the foyer. Jennifer's entire extended family gathered first, 3 generations posing on the sweeping staircase. Grandparents in the back, parents in the middle, children and grandchildren in front. The photographer took multiple shots, adjusting positions, asking people to move slightly left or right, to smile bigger, to look at each other lovingly. Then he turned to Michael's side. "Groom's family, please." Michael stood from his seat, and David immediately joined him, buttoning his jacket. Cassandra started to follow, but Jennifer's mother gently but firmly stopped her with a manicured hand on her arm. "Just blood family for this one." Dear, I stood, smoothing my dress nervously, and started toward the group, my heart pounding. Finally, I'd be included. Acknowledged, seen. Barbara held up a hand, stepping smoothly into my path. Just the real family, please, she said, her smile polite but firm, dismissive. I froze, feeling like I'd been slapped. I'm his mother. Of course you are, dear, Barbara said in that condescending tone people use when they're placating someone they consider difficult. But we're keeping these pictures traditional. Father and son. The core family unit. We'll do extended family photos later, I promise. Extended family. Like I was an aunt twice removed or a distant cousin. Like I hadn't been the one who held Michael's hand on his first day of school. Like I hadn't been the one who sat beside his hospital bed when he broke his arm. Like I hadn't been everything. Michael stood there, frozen, his eyes darting between me and his father. He looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Didn't correct Barbara, didn't insist I be included. David put his arm around Michael's shoulders possessively, and they posed together. Father and son. The camera flashed. Once, twice, 3 times, each flash feeling like a knife. I stood there 5 feet away, watching my son smile for pictures that erased me. Pictures that would hang in their home, that would be shared with friends and family, that would tell a story where I didn't exist, where I'd never mattered. Ruth appeared at my elbow, her face furious. Let's get some air, she said tightly. Outside, under the string lights in the garden, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, constricted, like someone was sitting on it. My vision blurred with tears I refused to shed, not here, not where someone might see. The world spun and tilted dangerously. Ruth held me upright while I gasped for air, while panic clawed at my throat. I'm going to talk to him, Ruth said, her voice hard and angry. I'm going to tell him exactly what he's doing. No. I grabbed her arm desperately. Don't, please, it's his wedding weekend. I don't want to ruin it. He's ruining it, Ruth hissed. He's letting them erase you, and he's just standing there watching it happen. But what could I do? 'Cause a scene? Demand to be included like some desperate, needy mother? Force my son to choose between me and his new family, knowing he'd already made that choice by his silence? I went back to my hotel room early, making quiet excuses about a headache. Sat on the bed in the dark, still in my dress. Stared at my phone, scrolling through photos I'd saved over the years. Michael as a baby, his face scrunched and red. Michael at his first day of school, missing his front teeth. Michael graduating high school, his cap crooked, his smile wide. Me beside him in every single one, the only parent who showed up. I thought about tomorrow. About standing in the back of the church, watching him marry Jennifer. Watching David walk him down the aisle like he'd earned that right through the years of abandonment. And I thought about the gift I'd brought. A check tucked carefully inside a cream-colored card, sealed in an envelope. $25,000. My entire savings account completely emptied. Money I'd been setting aside for years. Putting away $50 or $100 whenever I could. Planning to give him as a wedding gift to help him start his life. To buy a house. To have security. I pulled the envelope out of my purse. Stared at it for a long time, at my own handwriting on the front. Then I tore up the check. Ripped it into tiny pieces and let them fall like snow onto the hotel carpet. I sat down at the little hotel desk, pulled out the hotel stationery, and wrote a new card. My hand shook so badly the first attempt was illegible. I tried again. This time, my words were clear, precise, final. The wedding was beautiful. I'll give them that. The vineyard was absolutely picturesque. Rolling hills covered in grapevines. The ceremony held outdoors under a bower covered in white roses. Jennifer looked stunning in a gown that I later learned cost $45,000, her veil trailing behind her like something from a fairy tale. Michael looked handsome in his tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his face glowing with happiness. I sat in the very back row, the last row of white chairs. David sat in the front row, in the seat reserved specifically for the father of the groom. He walked Michael down the aisle, both of them smiling. While I watched from 6 rows back, behind Jennifer's great aunt and her cousins I'd never met and would never see again. At the reception, I was seated at table 14, even further from the action than at the rehearsal dinner. I didn't recognize a single person at my table. They were friends of Jennifer's parents, people who'd never met Michael before this weekend. Ruth had gone home that morning, unable to stomach watching anymore, unable to stay silent if she witnessed more erasure. I stayed for the first dance, watched Michael twirl Jennifer under the chandelier lights while everyone applauded and took photos. I stayed for the toasts, listened to David give another speech about fatherhood, about being there for Michael, about the bond they shared. People cried. Jennifer's mother dabbed her eyes again. Michael hugged his father. Then I placed my gift carefully on the table with the others, a modest envelope among boxes wrapped in expensive paper and elaborate bows, and left quietly through a side door. No one noticed. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. The card was simple. Plain white, no decoration, no elaborate design. Inside, I'd written in my careful handwriting, "Michael, I had planned to give you $25,000 to start your marriage. Money I saved from every overtime shift I worked while you were growing up. Every vacation I didn't take. Every worn-out pair of scrubs I didn't replace because you needed new shoes, new clothes, school supplies, basketball fees. Money I'd been setting aside since you were born, planning for this moment. But I've realized something sitting here this weekend. You don't need my money. You have your father now, despite everything. You have Jennifer's family with their wealth and connections and elaborate celebrations. You have a whole life where I'm the extended family, the backup option, the woman in the back row who doesn't warrant a mention. So instead, I'm donating that $25,000 in your name to the Single Mothers Support Fund, an organization that helps women like I was, women raising children alone, women working double shifts, women trying to hold everything together with no support, no recognition, no appreciation. Maybe it will help someone whose child will remember who was actually there when it mattered. I love you. I always will. That will never change. But I won't keep fighting for a place in your life that you've made painfully clear I don't have anymore. I hope you're happy. I hope Jennifer's family gives you everything you need. I hope your father continues to be there for you, though history suggests otherwise. Mom. I didn't hear from Michael for 3 days. 3 days of silence that felt like years. I went back to work, picked up my normal shifts at the hospital, tried desperately to fall back into my routine. Tried to lose myself in patient care and paperwork. Diane called every morning to check on me, sometimes just sitting on the phone in silence when I couldn't talk. Ruth called every night, her anger on my behalf a comfort somehow. On the 3rd day, late in the evening, my phone rang. Michael's name on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings, my heart pounding, before I answered. Mom. His voice was tight, strained, raw. We need to talk. Okay. Did you really donate my wedding gift? Yes. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, why would you do that? Because you don't need it, Michael. You have your father. You have Jennifer's family. You have everything you need without me. That's not fair. My laugh came out bitter, harsh. Fair? You want to talk to me about fair? Where were you when I needed you? When I was working 16-hour shifts to keep us afloat? When I sold my jewelry to pay your tuition? When I sat alone at your wedding rehearsal dinner at table 9 while your father took credit for raising you? He's trying now. He's my dad. He left you. My voice cracked, years of held-back pain spilling out. He walked away when you needed him most, and I stayed. I was there for every single moment. Every midnight fever. Every failed test. Every heartbreak. Every achievement. And you've spent the last 5 years acting like none of that matters. I'm not acting like it doesn't matter. You excluded me from family photos, Michael. At your own wedding. You stood there and let Jennifer's mother call me extended family while your father, who abandoned you for 3 years, got the front row seat and the honor of walking you down the aisle. Silence. Heavy. Painful. I didn't know they did that with the photos, he said finally. His voice quiet, small. You didn't stop it. You didn't say anything. You didn't insist I be included. You just let it happen." More silence. I could hear him breathing unsteady. "Jennifer's family they're intense. Her mom has very specific ideas about how things should be, and I didn't want conflict. I didn't want drama. I wanted everything to be perfect. So you chose them over me. You chose their comfort, their vision of perfection, over acknowledging the woman who raised you. That's not what I was trying to do." "Then what would you call it, Michael? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like you chose everyone else and forgot about me." He didn't answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with tears. "I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this." I closed my eyes, tears finally spilling over, running down my cheeks. "I don't know either. Can I try? Please, Mom, can I try to fix this?" I wanted to say no, wanted to protect myself from more disappointment, more hurt, more moments of being forgotten and erased. But he was my son, my only child, the person I'd loved more than anyone or anything for his entire life. And despite everything, despite the hurt and betrayal and abandonment I felt, I still loved him. "You can try," I said finally. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Michael and Jennifer showed up at my door unannounced. No warning phone call, no text message. Just there, standing on my porch with nervous expressions and red-rimmed eyes. "Can we come in?" Michael asked, his voice hesitant. I let them in silently. Made coffee with shaking hands while they sat at my kitchen table. The same table where Michael had done his homework. Where we'd eaten countless dinners together. Where I'd cried after David left. "I talked to Dad," Michael said without preamble, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Told him everything." "What happened at the wedding?" "What you wrote in the card, all of it." I said nothing, waiting. He tried to defend himself at first. Said he's here now, that's what matters. That the past is the past and we should move forward. I told him that's not how it works. That he doesn't get credit for showing up after you did all the hard work. That he doesn't get to play dad when it's convenient and erase the years you held everything together. Jennifer reached across the table tentatively, touched my hand gently. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Cooper. I had no idea my mother was treating you that way. I should have been paying more attention. I should have said something. I should have made sure you were included in everything. It wasn't your job to include me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside. "It was Michael's job. He's my son." "You're right," Michael said, his eyes red and wet. "You're absolutely right. It was my job, and I failed you completely. I got so desperate to have a dad again, to have that relationship back, that I forgot who actually raised me. Who was actually there through everything." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a white envelope, similar to the one I'd left at his wedding. Jennifer and I talked. A lot. "We're going to take new family photos. Real family photos. With you front and center, where you always should have been. We're framing them in our house, in the living room, where everyone who visits will see them." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a check made out to me. $25,000. "We don't want your sacrifice," Jennifer said softly, tears in her own eyes now. "We want you to keep that money. Use it for yourself. Take a vacation. Retire early. Do something that makes you happy. Whatever you want." I shook my head, pushing the check back across the table. "I donated that money. It's done. It's gone." "Then we donated the same amount in your name," Michael said quickly, "to the same fund. We matched it. But this is for you, from us. Because you deserve it. You deserve so much more than this, but it's a start." I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in years. Saw past the man he'd become to the boy I'd raised. Saw the guilt written across his face, the shame, the genuine remorse that made his hands shake and his voice crack. "I don't know if this fixes everything," he said, his voice breaking completely now. "I know it probably doesn't. I know I hurt you in ways I'm still understanding. But I want to try. I want to do better. I want you in our lives, really in our lives. Not as extended family or backup support, but as my mom. The person who matters most. The person who was always there. I wanted to stay angry, Wanted to hold on to my hurt and make him feel it fully. Make him understand the depth of the damage he'd caused. Part of me wanted to make him hurt the way I'd hurt, sitting alone at that table, watching him smile in photos I wasn't in. But he was trying. He was here. He was crying at my kitchen table and taking responsibility and asking for forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Enough to start rebuilding. Okay, I said finally, my own tears falling now. We'll try. But Michael, if this happens again, it won't, he said firmly. I promise you, Mom, it won't. It wasn't perfect after that. Healing never is. Michael still sometimes defaulted to calling David first for advice. Years of habit hard to break. Jennifer's mother still tried to monopolize their time and make decisions for them. There were still moments when I felt secondary, forgotten, less important. But Michael started calling me every Sunday again, like he used to. Long conversations about everything and nothing. He started including me in decisions, asking my opinion, valuing my input. He started remembering, actively and consciously, who I was to him and what I'd done. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, Jennifer got pregnant. When they saw those 2 pink lines on the test, I was the first person they called. Not David, not Barbara. Me. Mom, Michael said, his voice choked with emotion and joy. You're going to be a grandma. And when that baby was born 7 months later, a beautiful little girl with Michael's dark hair and Jennifer's bright eyes, I was in the delivery room. I held her before David did. Before Barbara did. Before anyone except her parents. They named her Ruth. After my sister who'd stood by me through everything, who'd witnessed my pain and shared my burden. At Ruth's christening 6 weeks later, they took family photos. This time I stood in the center, Michael on one side, Jennifer on the other, holding my granddaughter wrapped in a white christening gown that had been mine as a baby. David was there too, in his own separate photo. But I was in the one they framed and hung above their fireplace, the one displayed prominently in their entryway, the one that mattered. The one that told the truth. So what do you think? Did I do the right thing with that card, or was I too harsh? Should I have stayed silent? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.